Let's talk about blocks of code in Python. So a block of code is a collection of lines of code that all execute or are all skipped. And when we execute them, they're sequential. So the way we start a block is we use a colon. So use a colon to start a block, and then indent all the items in the block. So the beginning of the block has to have like some condition that tells you whether to run it or not. And so one way we can determine the condition that tells us whether do we run the block of code or not is to use the if command. So one of the conditionals we're going to use often is if and if else. So the if command starts a block, and it uses a Boolean expression to determine whether it should run or not. If the Boolean expression gives you a true, then that entire block, the entire set of indented pieces are going to run. If it's false, we're going to skip that block, okay? So it's a little bit tricky because if you only have an if command, it's just going to say run this block or not. It's not going to say to do something if you don't run the block. So that's where if else comes in. So this is 2 blocks of code. The if block runs 1 time if the expression is satisfied. And the else block runs the rest of the time. So if you want one of 2 things to happen, then you should use an if-else block. If you want only one thing to happen in certain times and you don't want anything to happen at the other time, then just use an if. So here's an example of a program which uses a bunch of if statements. What I want you to notice is it puts the if here, it gives the Boolean expression, and then it puts that colon at the end, and you can see that what happens is that it's indented, okay? So this program has a variable score, and it takes an integer value from 0 to 100. It says, if your score is greater than or equal to 90, then do this. Make a new variable letter and assign it the string A. Otherwise, and if you look, I want you to notice that all of these pieces here are part of that else block because they're all indented the same way. But then I get another if. So it says else, if, there's my if, and then it asks you for a score, so you have to do another Boolean expression there. If the score is greater than 80, there's your colon, indent, make the letter B. Else, so here's a second set of else things. So let's try to run this program a couple of times and see what happens. So the first one says, what's the score going to be? If the score is 92, what is this going to be the value of the variable letter? So if the score is 92, so when score is 92, we assign the value of score 92. We check this first if component, and 92 is greater than or equal to 90. That's true. So this letter is going to get assigned the string A. And nothing else is going to run in this program. Once that happens, we're going to assign letter A. We're not going to run any of those other blocks because the if happened, okay? So then we get to the second iteration, and we say, what happens if the score is 84? So we say 84 greater than or equal to 90. That's false, so it skips this whole block up here, and it goes to the else. So now it's at this next if statement. 84 greater than or equal to 80. That's true, so I'm going to run this piece, this block of code, letter, is going to get assigned a B. Okay. Now the third time I run it, I have score is 59. So it starts at the very top, right? Pretend you're Python tutor. You could put this in Python tutor and see what happens. And you're checking 59 greater than or equal to 90. False. So now I go down to this else block and I check the first if. 59 greater than or equal to 80. Again, false. So now I go down to this else block and I check that if. 59 greater than or equal to 70. False. So then I skip down to this else and I go to this if. 59 greater than or equal to 60. Again, false. So I skip down to this else. This else doesn't have a condition. It says this always happens. So it outputs to me letter F. So if your score was 59, then your letter would correspond to an F. What you notice is with all these else's and then putting an if down is kind of confusing, right? So what might be better to use is this other command called else if. So this is kind of like another way of doing if stuff else, else if. Okay, so another way to say that would be if, else if, and in both of these cases, you have to put conditions in here. Okay, so in both of these cases, you have to put conditions in there. So if I wanted to take that program that we just dealt with and try to rewrite it using else if. So let's try to rewrite this program using else if. Basically, what it's going to do using else if is it's going to combine these two statements, these two code block beginners, into one line. And then these two are going to get combined into one. These two are going to get combined into one. So if I was going to rewrite this, I would say score equals, and then remember score is a number. If score is greater than or equal to 90, you put your colon to say start a new block. Letter equals A. Notice I indented there. Now I'm going to go back out and I'm going to say else if, and I'm going to use that condition, score greater than or equal to 80, and then indent, because this is going to run the block that runs if score is greater than or equal to 80. Letter is going to be assigned the value B. I'm going to put another else if, because I had another condition here. Score greater than or equal to 70. Indent again. Letter equals C. One more time because I had one more condition down there. Else if score greater than or equal to 60, indent. So notice all the ifs and else ifs are on the same place, and then the things below them get indented. Letter is going to be D. The last thing I'm going to say is else, right? Because I don't have any more condition for this bottom one down here. So I'm just going to say else, put my colons there to say start a block, letter equals F. And then remember that last, anytime you start a block, you indent there. So this same program, the one where we said else if, and had to keep indenting, could be written just using the elif codes.